Thank you very much, Chair McGrath. And I also want to echo Dave's point. Thank you for everybody's work, especially a special shout out to Corey Mann, who did an excellent presentation and was being engaged with our staff all this time, along with the rest of the BCC staff to look at all the various aspects of the port study that you just heard about. So I'm going to share my screen, and please let me know by nodding, Corey, if you see it. All right, good morning. Again, thank you for this opportunity to speak before the committee and to present some basic facts and answer questions about Howard Terminal as a component of the region's Seaport Plan as adopted by the BCDC. Again, thank you everybody for your attention and time, and lots of time has been spent on this, and we hope to have a good dialogue here and answer any questions that the Commission and the Advisory Committee may have. Today, I will explain how the port has adequate space to develop its feasible maritime operations and growth in order to address the regional cargo needs without the use of Howard Terminal or with the use of Howard Terminal. Relevant to the discussion, I believe some background of the port and its operation is needed here. So if you bear with me, I do want to give some background on this, on the port. Let's see, sorry. I was already on the other slides. So first of all, the Port of Oakland, and be amazed how many people don't know this, and I believe everybody on SPAC knows this, but people in the public may get a reminder that the Port of Oakland operates 3 lines of business. That is the Oakland Seaport, which is the relevant today's discussion, but also the Oakland Airport and the waterfront commercial and visitor-oriented space for public access. We manage 20 miles of the Oakland shoreline, and significant portions are open space and public access parks. So you can see here on the map that the port's jurisdiction and our charge under the city charter and public trust actually expands all along the coastline, along the seaport waterfront, along this, the city of Oakland. And so our charge includes the seaport, as well as the airport, as well as commercial and visitor-oriented space in between. I think it's also important to note that the portion of the port jurisdiction and the footprint of the port has changed, and boundaries between each of the 3 lines of business that I just described have been withdrawn, redrawn, and changed over and over again, depending on the economic, business, and public priorities at the time. BCDC, in fact, has been a partner in the evolution of the port. The footprint of the seaport has also evolved with the redevelopment of the Navy and Army properties. With those properties, we grew substantially. Port is a department, and some more background. Well, actually, if you see the slide here, we can sort of illustrate that in the past, the seaport itself is quite, really focused on the inner estuary areas. Corey mentioned Brooklyn Basin, which is actually the heart of the port once upon a time in the far past. And then we evolved to today's footprint that we saw that presented. Also, just a reminder, the port is a department of the city of Oakland, governed by its board of port commissioners. The port's mission under the city charter is to promote and ensure the comprehensive and adequate development of the port through the continuity, control, management, and operation. The Port Commission has the authority to manage, lease, and acquire and sell port property. As you have seen, there's been vigorous debate over many meetings, providing many opportunities, the public input. The Port Commission has the authority to manage, sell, acquire port properties, but the City Council, on the other hand, has the control over the city's general plan, which controls the general use even in the Port of Oakland. So if you've seen, there's been vigorous debate over many meetings, providing opportunities for public input over whether the City Council ought to certify the environmental impact report as a precursor to amending the city's general plan. Now that the City Council has certified the EIR, the Council will be debating and deciding upon the policy basis for a change of the general plan for the use of the Howard Terminal, taking into considerations economic development, housing, recreation, port compatibility, environmental justice, and community benefits issues. This is also put in a context. Concurrent with the city's council consideration land use change, the port must also consider its Thailand trust responsibilities and approvals under the California State Lands Commission. All port lands are held by the port in trust for the people of the state of California. The management and use of trust lands are subject to the state and Thailand trust laws, which are enforced and administered by the State Lands Commission. The State Lands Commission will need to execute a trust exchange agreement before the proposed development can happen. The port deeply values its relationship with BCDC. On behalf of the Port Board Commissioners, I'd like to thank the port staff again for your diligent work in promoting the BCDC's jurisdiction in charge of protecting the San Francisco Bay and promoting its beneficial use. I think at this point, relevant to BCD's statutory charge, let me state at the outset that the proposed project does not propose any fill of the bay. One of the primary goals of the project is to increase public access to the Oakland waterfront after extensive sea level adaptation and hazardous materials remediation that the Oakland A's will be investing in. The proposed real estate document between the A's and the port will not give any right over any water areas to the Oakland A's. Their rights in the real estate document is only to the land areas in Howard Terminal. In addition to the in the negotiation agreement between the port and A's, the port reserves the right to elect to use up to 10 acres of Howard Terminal for expansion of the Inner Harbor Turning Basin, which will enlarge the water area of the bay. I think much has been said before this commission about forecasted growth and use for the over next 50 years. In my presentation, I will show that accurately forecasting growth is at best an imperfect science due to the constant ups and downs of the shipping industry, including the recent supply chain congestion issues. Over the past 2 decades, projections of port cargo growth have proved overly optimistic. Even in the past year, as port congestion growth in imports made headlines, the port saw a decline in cargo volume in 2021 during the height of the port congestion. In the rest of my presentation, I will delve a little bit more into the factors behind the port's growth projections. Important for both the Seaport stakeholders and the Port Commission is that the Commission conditioned its consideration of the project on a set of measures to be negotiated and included in the project so that the ballpark and residential commercial developments will be compatible with the operation and growth of the seaport. So let's delve into more about the Oakland Seaport. The Oakland Seaport consists of 1,300 acres, 780 acres of marine terminals adjacent to the wharf, 300 acres of non-water fronting auxiliary services, including refrigerated storage and transload facilities, 110 acres of port-owned rail, 70 acres of roadway, 46 acres of park and open space with trails, public parking, and other visitor amenities. The acreage and footprint of the seaport is significantly larger compared to the seaport even 20 years ago. In 2006, the Oakland Army Base land transfer, which commenced in 2003 and which was completed in 2006, added approximately 184 acres to the Oakland Seaport footprint to provide goods and movement logistic facilities. But even before the acquisition of the former Oakland Army Base in 1999, the port acquired 531 acres to the former Fleet and Industrial Supply Center from the Navy. So the Oakland Seaport added a total of 716 acres in the past 25 years, and within the lifetime of my professional career, more than doubling of the seaport footprint. Prior to even the military transfers and before the port also built the 7th Street Peninsula, where another terminal stands today in its historic migration of the port from the east to the west. Like I mentioned before, the original port acreage at the founding of the port was more the shelter reaches of the Inner Harbor area of the estuary close to downtown Oakland in the area known as Jacqueline Square today. but the trend has been eastward. And you see the map again of the sort of evolution of the port. Let's also talk about volume, because the seaport has, just as the seaport has evolved and grown in terms of the volume of cargo, the acreage has grown, and frankly, the acreage has grown faster than our volume. And though both the port and BCDC and other planning agencies have various contexts try to project growth into the future, the actual pattern of growth has eluded accurate predictions. For example, the environmental impact report produced for the transfer of the Oakland Army Base projected and mitigated for growth to 4 million TEUs by 2020. Today, in 2022, the actual growth has significantly failed to meet the projections. It's averaged approximately 1% growth over the past 10 years. We are now at 2.44 million TEUs as of 2021. Even today, as we speak, Oakland's export volumes continues to decline because of global factors. So, while the Seaport cargo forecast for 2023 provided regional long-term projections of Bay Area cargo throughput, the port does not, because of the variability of forecasts and the inability to predict. The port really in its planning does not rely on forecasts for our specific business and land use planning. Instead, the port tracks cargo volumes on a quarterly basis to determine actual growth rates. And because these growth rates reflect actual business activity, we believe they're a better predictor of future growth. We rely on market analysis and planning activity for capital asset planning and development activities. Let me just go into some of the factors that's influencing the growth at the Port of Oakland. First, the Port of Oakland is primarily a regional port, and therefore its market is smaller than ports such as Los Angeles and Long Beach that serve a greater national market. Also, the port is primarily a second port of call. That means most shipping lines choose to first stop at another West Coast port such as Los Angeles, Long Beach, Tacoma, or Seattle. So as national seaport volumes and port congestion have increased, the port of actually saw many ships skipping their usual port of call at Oakland in order to consolidate their cargo transfer at other West Coast ports and to speed up the return of vessels to Asia. Even though any person reading the news today would assume that the Port of Oakland cargo volume is growing leaps and bounds, but actually, as I mentioned before, in 2021, when congestion was at its worst, the cargo port volume at the Port of Oakland actually decreased by 0.5%. So the historical cargo volume and pattern and the market and industry factors suggest that it is reasonable to view the median forecast contained in the BCDC staff report as actually aggressive, and the low forecast may be the appropriate of the three options presented, as it still reflects a higher growth rate than the port has typically experienced in the modern era. So if you see the chart that is in the screen today, you see that the cargo growth the last 10 years has averaged 1% annually. And we have not certainly met the Oakland Army Base EIR projection of 4 million TEU by 2020. And also just want to make a note that whatever projections we have done and the excellent work that's done in the Tioga report that was recently made in that report really has been upended by the COVID pandemic and the resulting massive turmoil in the industry. I would surmise that if we did the report again, many of the factors that we're experiencing today in the congestion, and then many of the sort of things and lack of investment in the port industry will have to figure into that equation. So while we believe that the BCDC existing Seaport plan recognizes the volatility in the maritime industry, I think general policy number 3 requires the continuous monitoring of the region's marine cargo volumes, marine terminal use, and ship calls on an ongoing basis. So projecting the 50-year future, we would surmise is something of an art, and that in any case, we suggest and we recommend that the SPAC and the commission adopt the low growth scenario in the BCDC report. We also believe that for the purpose of the BCDC Seaport plan, the Port of Oakland is best positioned to work with the BCDC staff to determine the probable and feasible development of the port to meet our mutual obligations to both conserve the bay and develop it for port use. The port is vested with a public responsibility to manage the port, charged with these responsibilities, and because the port is intimately involved in day-to-day operation reality of maritime commerce, the port has undertaken a seaport planning process that has involved the continuous participation of industry stakeholders, public agency partners, including regional transportation agencies and BCDC, neighboring communities, and the public. During this planning process, the relevant factors for planning are not so much based on future projections of cargo growth and the acreage needed by cargo type as the focus of the BCDC. Rather, the factors that may determine our future are investment in quality jobs and workforce, evolving industry needs, sustainability both in terms of the environment and financial feasibility, infrastructure, city port land use planning, and a zero emissions port. Indeed, I appreciate that the BCDC staff has noted that one of the three decision factors for today is not only acreage and growth projection, but the feasibility of using any port area for a particular seaport purpose. Among the factors that we're looking at the port is that investing in more effective and efficient use of our current capacity at 1,300 acre footprint of the seaport. Let me give you one example. There are currently 120 acres available at the Outer Harbor Container Terminal that today is not actively being used for container port operations. I believe if I go back to the port map here, you will see the Outer Harbor is the orange, so the orange area right beside the blue area. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but that is the Outer Harbor area. Thank you. So that's 120 acres available for container use today, but is not actively being used for container cargo operations. If you take a look at the picture I have on the screen right now, that's what it's being used for, not for a container operation, but not for a cargo transfer, a maritime container operation, but for more storage of containers, similar to what's being used at Howard Terminal today. Outer Harbor has deep water berthing. It has sufficient backland acreage to accommodate modern ship calls and transfer cargo. It is easily accessible to rail, but it is yet another piece of waterfront property currently used for single stack container storage because of the lack of necessary investment to pave the lot, to reconstruct the wharf, to acquire modern equipment, including electrification equipment, and to make necessary access upgrades. Outer Harbor was last operated as a terminal by the Outer Harbor Terminal LLC, which declared bankruptcy in 2016 because of lack of financial feasibility. However, the best and highest use of Outer Harbor Terminal is the reactivation of a marine terminal operation with adequate investment. Though the BCDC staff reports indicate that Howard Terminal is the only dormant terminal suitable for all three uses discussed, I will submit that the Outer Harbor fits this criteria. The Outer Harbor Terminal has deep water and sufficient backlands, again, with proximity to the port logistics complex and rail yards. Another interim use on an 18-acre section of the Outer Harbor Terminal, as Corey mentioned, is an interim use as a sand and gravel aggregate bulk terminal to support construction needs, such as housing in the region. And of course, it will not impact the future development of container terminal because it's on the side and is a temporary use. Hopefully, infrastructure funding will activate this terminal's potential as a future active maritime use to add to the capacity available at the Port of Oakland. With that as context, let's move to the Howard Terminal site itself. In contrast to the outer harbor, as the state staff noted, the Tower Terminal is currently, though designated as a container port under the Seaport Plan. Actually, let me move to this map. It is currently designated under this BCDC plan as a container port. It is clear that the Howard Terminal is no longer needed or suited for a container terminal. Howard Terminal is an approximately 50-acre site that is separated from the rest of the seaport by Schnitzer Steel. It is located adjacent to the existing mixed-use development on the west end of Jackson Square. As well, the site lacks the water depth required for today's larger vessels. It is right now a minus 42 feet of depth compared to the 50 feet that's needed. It lacks sufficient backlands for modern container terminal operation. 50 acres is simply inefficient, and will lack even dockage if the inner harbor terminal basin widening project is complete. The last Howard Terminal operator requested early termination of its lease in 2013, again because of the lack of feasibility of the use of the terminal. Currently, its primary interim use is a single stack container storage and some truck cab parking. After the last tenant at Howard Terminal left, the port spent years engaged in extensive due diligence to evaluate Howard Terminal's suitability for various other maritime uses. Following the leaving of the last terminal tenant, we tried to market the site for maritime uses, and the port board issued an RFP for an operator. The port received 3 proposals, and the most responsive of those, which contained a financial plan as well as the use of all 50 acres, was to use the 50 acres for a coal terminal. The port board at that time made a policy decision that this coal terminal use was unsuitable. After that, other uses were also explored, but none came to fruition because of lack of financial infrastructure feasibility. Thus, the port was approached in Oakland A in 2018 to negotiate their present waterfront ballpark proposal. And you can see this is its current use at the Howard Terminal site, single stack container storage on a waterfront space. And then we come to the Oakland A's proposal in 2018. The port then made a policy decision to enter into an exclusive negotiating agreement for consideration of the proposed ballpark project. So I think if you look at this map, this is what the sort of diagram metrics of what the Oakland A's is proposing. And if you see that the port right now, as Corey mentioned, is engaged in a feasibility study to use that reserve 10 acres for the widening of the turning basin. Assuming that that is accomplished, the berthing space at the Howard Terminal is really not feasible for any kind of terminal use, container terminal use. The proposed waterfront project, the ballpark project, is an opportunity for the Oakland Seaport to write the next chapter of the economic community benefits for not only the region, but while furthering the statewide purpose of encouraging public access to the waterfront. As I mentioned, also the port operates its commercial real estate in Jackson Square being the most westerly portion of that use. And we believe that it also be very beneficial for that use as well. So land use decision on the general plan amendment is now in front of the city council. And the next step, as Corey mentioned, in terms of the cities and the port process, is that now that the EIR has been approved, it will be coming to you. It has come to you now, but it is also coming to the Port Commission for its approval of any real estate documents if they choose to prove that. So I think I am going to end my presentation today, and I will be available for any answers and questions.